So here's our first drive review of the updated Alfa Romeo Tonale. Well, what's changed exactly? Well, a few things, but not as much as perhaps we would like. We'll start with the styling because that's the most obvious difference. And around the front, there are a few changes. The first thing you might spot is that the number plate is now at the center. It used to be off to one side, which was for a long time a very Alfa Romeo thing, but they've kind of conformed now with everyone else and the number plate's down at the center. That's because there's a new Scudetti. The shield here on the front grille has been changed with a little bit more in line with what we see on the Junior, which is the slightly smaller crossover, and I think it looks pretty good. It's a nice sort of change. You've got the extra vents here on the side, you've got some more vents further down, although all of this area here is kind of just made to look like vents but aren't really vents. There are still a little bit of air curtains on the side which will help direct airflow out across the front wheels. There's a fresh take on the kind of tree design headlights, and overall it looks pretty good. This is also a new color. This is called Rosso Brero. Again, a bit of a nod to Alfa's past, and it loves to make those nods to its pretty rich heritage. So that's the kind of front end what's changed. There's also some new wheel designs, and these kind of three spoke designs, these are 20-inch wheels. They do stand out, they look pretty good, I think. And again, we've seen some really great looking wheels on the Junior, especially the Junior Veloce, and there are going to be other versions of this available. You don't have to go for these. There are some more normal looking wheels available as well. And you'll also notice this has the Sport Speciale, which is a launch version of this car. But depending on which market you're in, there will be up to 4 different versions, including a TI version and also a Sprint. There are some other details as well. You notice a little Italian tricolour flag there, the tricolore, because this is actually made in Italy as well. So it's a proper Alfa in that respect. One other thing is you notice it does have a bit of a kind of sloping roofline here, but you will notice that the actually is included into the doors, which means you do get a pretty useful door aperture. So getting in and out, even for adults, actually is more practical than you might find. Around the back, there isn't really any sort of major changes. It's pretty much as we've had before. You've got the latest version of the Alfa Romeo badge here. You've got Tonale spelled out across the back, and I'm very pleased to say a nice big rear wiper, because so many people in this segment have inexplicably stopped putting rear window wipers, but they're very creative here in Alfa. They're sticking with that. Also, you'll also see that you get exhausts on both sides as well, and these are proper exhausts as well. So Alfa really playing up to the true enthusiasts that we are. There is one slight trade-off when it comes to boot space with the plug-in hybrid. You don't get quite as much as you do with the mild hybrid. So this gets 385 litres as standard, and you can increase that to 1,430 litres if you fold down the rear seats, and they have a 60-40 split. In comparison, the mild hybrid version gets 500 litres and 1,550 litres in total volume. Now, you do get a couple of extra things. There are some bag hooks, there's a 12-volt socket in here, you've got lights on either side, and there is a little bit of extra storage under the floor for things like your charging cables and 1 or 2 small odds and ends. But as you can see, it is taken up with a lot of other stuff. You don't get a spare wheel, for example. That's all because of the hybrid battery. So it's enough to put your charging cables and 1 or 2 small items out of the way, but you do lose out on boot space, which is one of the things you might want to consider if you are considering the plug-in hybrid. There are 3 different powertrain options available with the Alfa Romeo Tonale. This is the plug-in hybrid version. It's got a 1.3 litre petrol engine paired with an electric motor, which means it's got all-wheel drive, and it has an electric driving range of 61 kilometers, and it averages around about 3.5 litres per 100 kilometers. There is also going to be a 1.5 litre mild hybrid version, and in some other markets there's also going to be a 1.6 litre diesel, although that diesel is not going to come to the Irish market. On the inside of this updated Tonale, there hasn't been a huge amount of change, but there are a couple of updates that perhaps owners of existing Tonales will see the difference in. Start with the driving position. It's pretty comfortable. There's slightly newer seat design, new upholstery as well. And in this particular one, the seats are electrically adjustable. So I can do everything from forward and back movements, height, and also the seat back is all done electrically. And it's pretty nice. There's also a bit of lumbar support as well for your lower back. The steering position is manually adjustable, but there is a decent amount of reach and rake here, so you can play around a little bit to get a comfortable driving position that will suit you. I do like the steering wheel. It's got a nice feel to it. It's not super small equally. It's not overly big and chunky, so it feels good in your hands. The overall shape and design hasn't really changed, although some people may notice that the volume dial has been reprogrammed, whereas previously I think it used to cycle through your radio stations. Now it just does the volume, which is a bit more of an intuitive thing. You do have all your driving controls are on the left side of the steering wheel, so your cruise control, lane keep assist, all that stuff is done here. And you have, of course, your engine start, your ignition is on the wheel as well. So that's kind of a nice feature to have. You've got a fully digital instrument display in front, although it has that kind of classic two binnacle shape to it. It all works quite well, and I like that Alfa has kind of kept to a traditional looking display here as well. So all the gradations on the speedo are nice and even. You've got a control on the right side that you can adjust, so depending on what you want to have, if it's a trip computer, all those kind of things. So you can play around a little bit with what is on display here as well, which is good. The infotainment system, pretty much the same as before. There are a couple of updates. There are thankfully a good mixture of physical buttons as well as the display itself. So things like your temperature control is done via the buttons here. They have a toggle on either side. Nice and intuitive. I also like that the temperature settings, the buttons actually extend a little bit further. Just makes it even easier to adjust without ever having to look down at it. So that's good. You can adjust the fan speed at the center. All the usual aircon stuff is there. So that's a positive. The display, it's not the biggest, but equally it's fine. It's not too in the way. It doesn't become a distraction. Although, you know, you've got all your usual stuff like your Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, things like that can be there. And you can also have your smartphone app and things like that as well. One interesting thing that Alfa has added, so you may notice I've got this on, and this isn't my Whoop or my Fitbit. This is actually a kind of go anywhere bracelet for the car itself. So rather than having the car key, I just have this. It's just branded with Tonale on the side. And I guess if you're going mountain biking or swimming or anything like that and you don't want to have a key with you, you can just take this with you. It will start, unlock the car, lock it again without having to use the key. Just works off a near field proximity. So that's kind of useful to have. Not everyone might be a bit confident in using it, but we've been using it today. We are driving this without a key. We've just got this and it's been fine getting in and out of the car all day. So it's a bit of a novelty. Maybe some people will like that. The center console has also been slightly modified here. So you still have the DNA switch, which is the drive mode selector here. Nice and well positioned, I think, where it is that you can just simply do the adjustments. You've got three modes. You've got dynamic, natural or normal, and then kind of more eco mode as well. So you've got that. You can also adjust the suspension settings as well. So if you do want to have a little bit of adjustment, and you also use this to switch off the traction control if you so wanted. One other change to the center console is that there's a new rotary controller rather than a traditional drive, shift, select lever. So it is a little bit nicer. It's got a knurled finish. It's kind of got this glossy black surround, which I'm not always a massive fan of, this glossy black, but I think it will kind of work okay here. And you simply just twist it around to go into your drive. Although interestingly, it just keeps spinning. So even when you go around to drive, it won't go past drive, but it will just keep turning around. It doesn't just go a couple of notches and stop. You just simply press park down to the center to go back into park, and equally if you want to go into reverse, you just twist it the other way. So quite simple to use, you can't really get that wrong, and I guess it does free up a little bit more space around this center console. You've still got an electric handbrake, you've got your volume control here as well, so you have it on the steering wheel and you have it here. Perhaps your passenger might find that a bit more useful. There's a pair of cup holders in the center. You do have a little bit of extra storage under here. It's not the biggest or deepest of bins to use, so I think most people may just stick to using that as an armrest, but as an armrest it's actually quite comfortable. And one other thing you get is a new upgraded wireless phone charger. So if you want to pop your phone in there, it's now a ventilated system. So we all know that these wireless phone chargers can get a little bit overheated sometimes. With this now, you just put your phone in and it actually diverts some of the air from the air conditioning to ensure that it doesn't overheat. As soon as you put it on, it charges quite quickly, and you do still have USB-C and a USB-A port in there as well. So you are still getting physical charging options with a wire if you don't want to use the wireless phone charger. Now, one other thing that has also changed, I mentioned the seats. There's new upholstery options. This is a little bit more fetching black and white combination here. This kind of suede-like material in the center with a leather-like material on the outer section. Looks quite nice. The white perhaps might not wear too easily, but there are some other upholstery options available, including pretty striking looking red leather interior if you really want to unleash your inner passionate Italian. Now let's have a look and see what it's like in the back. You do get a reasonably good amount of space, partly because there's enough headroom. There isn't a glass roof in this particular model, so you do have a little bit of extra headroom. And for reference, I'm average height, I'm 5'9", so pretty average. And yeah, I'm not doing too badly in terms of overall space. I've got a little bit of knee room here to spare. This driving seat is set up from my normal driving position, so I'm sitting behind myself in that regard, and I do have a reasonable amount of space. I do also like that there's enough room on the floor that I can get my feet in underneath the seat in front quite comfortably. So if I do want to stretch out a little bit more, I can. Now, there isn't any sort of recline adjustment like we see in some other models for this, but the overall angle, seating angle, isn't too bad. On a practical level as well, there's things like a small door bin here. It's enough for a small drinks bottle, but really not much else. You do get a small armrest here, not the biggest or most comfortable, but it will do on a medium or short journey. I've got some pockets on the backs of both front seats if you want to put an iPad, tablet, books, magazines, anything in there. You also do get charging ports back here, both USB-A and USB-C. You get one of each there as well, and there is vents in this particular model, although there's no tri-zone climate control, just the actual vent controls themselves. Both of the outer rear seats have Isofix, as of course you would expect. The middle seat isn't too bad either. It's obviously a much firmer base than what we get on the outer seats, but it's reasonably wide in here, so that's a bit of a plus. Although the only thing is, although it's a little bit wider here, you do lose out a little bit in terms of foot room in the center seat, because you have these seat rails that come quite far back, and there is still quite a pronounced hump in the center of the floor. So that means you are going to kind of fight for foot room with whoever is sitting on either side. Now, if you're not using that middle seat, as usual, you can also pop down what is actually quite a wide armrest here. There's two cup holders and a kind of middle slot that you could put a mobile phone in or something like that, for example. And you do also get a hatch that you can reach into the boot as well. So that's a useful thing, whether you need to load in longer items or whether you just want to, on a long trip, reach in and get something out of a bag. Pretty useful altogether. But yeah, it's a comfortable position back here for adults of medium to average height. Nice amount of space. The windows aren't the biggest, but equally they're not also super high, so even kids in smaller seats should be pretty comfortable. Like most plug-in hybrids, your Tonale journey starts in electric mode. That's pretty much the default setting with it. Even if there's not a whole lot of charge in the battery, it will still do that. Now, the battery in the powertrain hasn't changed from its predecessor. It's still a 15.5 kilowatt hour battery, and it's a lithium ion composition. It's good for 61 kilometers in WLTP combined driving. The real world, well, it's a little bit less than that, but it's not a huge amount less than that. And if you are doing predominantly urban or city driving, well, yeah, it does get a little bit better in that sense. You will get slightly longer, but as ever, those figures vary on a lot of different conditions, whether you've occupied all the seats or you've got a lot of weight in the boot, or for example, right now I'm driving on my own. So that will vary a little bit. Now, even when you are in electric mode, performance isn't bad. The electric motor is rated at 128 horsepower, so it's not a slouch in any way, but equally you do feel that if you do try and drive it that little bit more quickly, you are going to prefer to use both motors. Now, the petrol engine up front, again, that's a 1.3 litre petrol engine. It's got okay performance. It's, you know, it's a little bit raspy at times. It's not the most exciting of engines, but it's fine for this application, I find anyway. It's, you know, it's there are better plug-in hybrids out there. There are worse plug-in hybrids out there. The overall combined performance, if you dial everything up with this little DNA switch down here and you put it into the dynamic mode, it does one of two things. First of all, if you happen to be in the electric mode, it then awakens the combustion engine, but you do also then get a slightly stiffer suspension setup. Now, you do have this damper button at the center, and you still have an option of having the sport mode, which does things like sharpens the accelerator pedal, the steering, and even the brake feel and this suspension. But you can press that once more and that will give you a softer damper, and it's a bit of a better balance, I find. Now, the one thing is, with both motors active, you have 270 horsepower, and it is actually brisk enough. Now, I don't think it quite feels like 270 horsepower would in a hatchback. After all, this is the hatchback. It's still a bit of a lumpy engine that does sound a little bit coarse at times. But the thing is, with this, when you leave it in the auto mode, it does get a little bit eager, and sometimes it doesn't always get it right. That's the thing. Now, what you can do is use these paddles on the backs of the steering wheel, and do you know what? This is one thing Alfa really has gotten done well in the Tonale. These are just like what you get in the larger Giulia and the Stelvio models. And in a way, it's a bit of a masterclass to all other car makers as to how you should have paddles on the backs of your steering wheel. Now, they are probably, for some people, a little bit overkill. I can understand that. But they do have a lovely action to them. They feel nice. And if you pull and hold in the right paddle for 2 seconds, it goes into a manual mode and stays in that manual mode, and you are then free to upshift or downshift to your heart's content. Fuel consumption be damned. Now, of course, if you pull it and hold it in once more for 2 seconds, it just goes back into your regular drive mode, and even then it's fine. But I think if you're going to be using the paddles, you're going to want to be in the sport mode. For the rest of the time, just being in the default sort of normal setting is absolutely fine, and it's really probably where the Tonale does its best work. Speaking of fuel consumption, right now we're using the engine and we're sitting at a pretty steady 80 kilometers an hour, and we're using around about between 6.9 and 7.2 litres per 100 kilometers, and we're just traveling on the flat with no traffic. So that gives you a bit of an idea of where this car will be in terms of fuel consumption. And obviously if you're going to be on the motorway, it is going to be that bit thirstier, especially if you have depleted the battery. So this is an important aspect when considering plug-in hybrids, is that once you've used up that battery, the charge in the battery, and you're in a situation like this where you're not really getting an opportunity to replenish that charge properly via a plug, well, you're carrying a bit more extra weight and using more fuel. Now, even when that battery indicator does reach 0 kilometers, as it's done right now on the digital display, you do still have a hybrid mode. It will still try whenever possible to use the battery and the electric motor over the combustion engine. It won't always do it, but it will try and do it, especially if you're at slower speeds or you're in city traffic, anything like that. So you effectively go from having a plug-in hybrid to having a regular hybrid. You do have an e-save button on the center console, and that will basically also prolong the battery and keep it at a certain rate, but you're effectively then using your combustion engine much more, and then that kind of defeats the purpose. And look, this is a plug-in hybrid like all other plug-in hybrids. If you are fastidious about plugging this in and charging it up all the time, so whenever you have this thing parked up, it's plugged into your charger, and you keep that battery topped up all the time, well, then yeah, you will see some benefits from it. The range isn't the best. You've got other plug-in hybrids out there, for example the Volkswagen Tiguan, that will give you much more range. You know, we're now have a stage where plug-in hybrids are giving you 3-figure electric ranges, and that makes them suddenly much more appealing as vehicles, because you really can do your Monday to Friday driving using only the battery, and then for that one weekend trip that you do once a month, you don't have to worry about plugging in and charging or doing anything like that. You can just drive. So the thing is, like all plug-in hybrids, you've got to take those specs that we showed you earlier in terms of driving range and fuel economy and all that kind of stuff with a pinch of salt, because if you don't use these cars properly, then you're not going to get the same benefits. And that's the single, probably the most important thing if you're considering a plug-in hybrid. So that's our first drive review of this updated Alfa Romeo Tonale. The changes are disappointingly only really to do with the looks of this. There hasn't been any updates to the electric powertrain, there isn't a larger battery with a longer driving range, and we feel that's a bit of a missed opportunity on Alfa's part. But still, the changes on the inside do help keep it a bit more modern, and some of them are also practical and will be welcomed by perhaps somebody that already has a Tonale and wants to have some changes to it. It is not bad in terms of the overall interior space, although as we've shown earlier, you do lose out on the boot capacity if you go for this plug-in hybrid model. If you want to know more about the updated Alfa Romeo Tonale, head over to our website. It's CompleteCar.ie. You'll find a link to it in the description below, and it's a great resource for finding your next new car, as well as keeping up with all the latest car news. And be sure to check out our free email newsletter. It goes out once a week. It's free to sign up for and has a lot of exclusive email-only content. Thanks for watching.